internets, I'm Michael, and today on Toucan Play That Game we have a review of Legends Untold by Inspiring Games. So what is it? Well, looking at the box we have some quite terrible artwork, but yeah, it's some guys wielding axes and spears, quite young looking. They don't look like your typical adventures and they're in caves. Now the reason they are in caves is because this is the Caves environment deck. And this is actually a Kickstarter coming very soon. And during the Kickstarter, I think there are going to be 5 different decks you can get for different environments and giving you different enemies to face. And you can mix and match these to build all sorts of different adventures. And that's what this is. It's a game about adventuring, but it's a bit different to normal. It's very much an RPG card game. Now, this does that really well, better than most others. But before I get into that, let's go into more detail about how it does it. So what you do is you have your character and you'll pick one of these kind of fairly standard boring occupations compared to your normal adventurers that are barbarians or whatever. You know, you've got student, noble, farmhand is one of them. So they're quite standard old worldy people. This is very much a light fantasy setting, and that's definitely different in and of itself compared to a lot of the other games out there. But once you have your character, you're then able to really customize it using these talents. So you get to pick 3 talents. You get a weapon talent, which will relate depending on what kind of weapon you want to start with, and then 2 other ones. And these dictate how good you are at various things. They'll give you different abilities to use. So each talent has on it several different abilities that you can use. However, you won't be able to use each one every round. When you use an ability, most of the time you'll turn the card sideways, and that's the card exhausted for the round. And then you won't be able to use any of the other abilities on that card. Sometimes you'll even have to turn the card over. And this is especially bad because when you turn it over, that's it gone. You know, you don't get it back at the end of the round. But also, these talents act as your health, which is a really nice, really interesting way of doing it. It means that you can do this thing that's really exerting yourself, and it means that you're taking damage doing it. You're putting yourself at risk. And it means that there's no fiddly tokens or anything else, you know, bits of paper, having to track that health, which is a really nice and different thing than anything I've seen in another game. Having your abilities and your health connected in that way, very interesting. So once you've built your character up like that, you then start exploring the dungeon. And you do that, again, with cards. There are these location cards, and you have one that's the start that you start at. And then over the course of the turns, you'll draw new cards. So you draw a location to explore, and you pick which exit you're going from. And the lighting on the cards matters. So some places are brightly lit, some are dimly lit. And that dictates how easy it is to then scout out the new location. And scouting is important because it determines whether you're going to get bonuses in certain things. And if you stumble across a trap and you did a poor job of scouting, you're just going to set it off immediately. Really interesting. So yeah, that's definitely different. It's definitely interesting. There's a lot going on there. And as you explore, you'll be going through this adventure deck, facing obstacles and different encounters, and also facing, you know, creatures, traps, all sorts of things. You know, you'll have these things that are just encounters that are like story almost. It's really well done. There is a lot that parallels this to an RPG with that. And of course, when you get into battle, you will then fight. And the way you resolve most things in this, be it challenges for fighting or challenges because you've encountered a trap, or even the scouting, is rolling dice. And you roll 3d6. So it's quite a... That kind of evens out. Because you've got 3 dice, that very much brings it more central with your likely results. Now, what I did find in this is that I'm really unlucky with dice, and that kind of caused a lot of problems for me playing this because I felt like I couldn't ever really do anything. And you look at the probabilities involved in this, and I should have been able to. So I think that's more just my bad luck getting in the way of the gameplay than it actually being a problem with the gameplay. So what else do you do in this? Well, you have a different scenario card each time. You can pick a different one, you can pick randomly or select specific ones, and these scenario cards will give you specific things you need to achieve in the game. So it is a co-op game, you are all working together, and there isn't a GM required. The cards and all of that are doing that for you, which is really nice. I like games that are full co-op with regards to kind of dungeon crawling RPG experience. And these scenarios are they're interesting enough. They are quite varied, the ones that come in this one box, and obviously you can get multiple boxes, and they will be releasing other boxes in the future probably. The gameplay itself, though, does tend to feel the same a lot of the time. Because, okay, you've got this specific mission, but how you're doing that is always the same. It's always about that scouting, that exploring new locations, finding new stuff. It's all about, right, go through this many locations, find these items, do this, do that. It all comes down to the same gameplay. So yes, you've got different goals that you need to meet, and some are easier than others and some are harder than others. And yeah, so there is an awful lot going on in this game, as you can tell. But what it boils down to is it is an RPG experience. It's very much Pathfinder, D&D, that sort of thing. If you enjoy that and you want a way to do that without a GM and have it be a mostly card game, obviously there is a bit of dice in there as well, then this is a really good way to do that. So what are my full thoughts then? Well, components I'm not going to talk about because this is a prototype. None of these components are finalised. Artwork, I'm not keen on the artwork. The graphic design is really good. Like the symbols and everything, they've dramatically improved those. I saw an earlier version and they did a lot to improve the artwork there. But the actual pictures that there are in the game don't hugely appeal to me. As I said, I dislike the cover art, for example. Now, what about the gameplay? For my personal tastes, this is just too complex. Now, as I've told you a brief overview of the game, you've probably got an idea of just how confusing and how much is going on in this game. And there really is a huge amount that it's kind of almost on par with a lot of RPGs in the amount of stuff you have to do, but you just don't have that GM to worry about. And it's not like some miniatures games which take that dungeon crawl aspect of an RPG and give you that without having a GM. This gives you more of the actual roleplay feel with all the different encounters, with the scenarios and with events that trigger. You know, that all works really interestingly. And as I say, the amount of kind of customization you can do on your characters is really good. And there's a well thought out kind of progression with regards to campaign play of as you play an adventure, you level up. Each adventure you do, that's a new level. And each time you level up, you'll either gain new talents or equipment or items, or you'll upgrade existing ones. It's nice and it's a simple system and it allows you to really flesh out and develop your character. And of course, the more cards you've got, the more talents you've got to pick from, etc. And you know, you can have your same group of heroes tackle one deck of cards and then go and tackle a completely different location, different villains, you know, and carry on that story, which is really nice. But as I say, it is very complicated because these talents, for example, each one of these has 3 different abilities you need to learn. So playing your first game, it's right, here are your 9 abilities you need to learn, and you need to know which ones are on each card, so which you can trigger, which you can't, and then you'll get into a situation, it'll be like, all right, look at this. And added to that is the fact that there are a ton of technical terms in this you need to remember. You've got advantage, disadvantage, scouting, all the different test terms. You know, this is just a cheat sheet of the terms specifically for this deck of cards. The actual rulebook has an entire A4 sheet of the different terms to remember. So for me personally, that's a real hurdle to overcome. But when you do, as I say, this is probably the best game I've encountered for giving you that RPG feel with a deck of cards. Now, what other thoughts have I got on it? Well, one of the things that you come across when you are exploring this map are barriers. They're things, obstacles that are in your way that you need to kind of get through. And these are great. They add a nice little element to the game. And the thing is, they stay there, and some events will shut those barriers, and you need to make sure that they're open in order to be able to finish the game. The problem with this is there's not an easy way to track which barrier relates to which card. You can kind of try and tuck it under, and it just is very fiddly and doesn't work very well. Now, another issue I have is the combat. The combat is quite good. At first I found it a bit difficult, and that's because I started playing this as a one player. And it isn't very balanced for one player. It's something that they're working on. It's much better when you're comparing 3 to 4 player or even 2 to 3 player. And the combat's really interesting for that, because at the top of these foes that you're fighting, it tells you how many creatures there are, depending on the number of heroes you're using. So this is really interesting. It helps to balance the difficulty of those challenges. But the problem with playing one player as opposed to playing with more players is that you have much fewer skills. So when you're exploring through the dungeon and it's, right, you need to do an IQ test. Oh, well, I took the dumb guy. I'm not going to be able to pass an IQ test. And you don't have any other characters to share that burden with, which is kind of a shame. So it very much feels like it's best played with 3 or 4 heroes. Now, you could obviously control multiple heroes each, or just play it as a 3 or 4 player game. So that would work perfectly fine. So that kind of covers the can 2 play that game. Yes, it can. You know, it's 1 to 4 players. I think if you buy more decks of cards, you'd be able to play more players as well. But yeah, so overall my thoughts are that it does that RPG feel really well, but it has a few niggling things that just don't feel quite right. But you are easily able to get past those. The learning curve on this is very severe. You know, you'll have several games of several hours each, looking, oh, what does that do again? How do I do this again? What's the next thing to do? It will take you a while to get into this, but when you do, it is a rich and vivid experience. It is very much that RPG experience, but without needing a GM. Okay, I do hope that you've enjoyed this video and found it useful, and of course if you have, please do check out the rest of the videos on the channel, as well as subscribing to the channel and sharing it with your friends and family. And do also take a look at us on social media. You can find us on Facebook and on Twitter. And as always, thanks for watching, and bye for now.